Zarnik sat silently in the observation chamber, his many eyes scanning the human child sitting before the Starship simulator. The room was bathed in the soft glow of holographic screens, flashing with vibrant images of explosions and flashing enemy fire. Yet the child remained calm, their small hands moving deftly over the controls, as if guided by some instinct that Zarnik could not comprehend. The simulator was supposed to be a training ground for young humans to learn the art of space warfare, but the Admiral found himself fixating on the child's movements. There was something different about the way they played. It was almost as if they weren't playing at all, as though they were commanding a real ship in the middle of a battle. Zarnik had seen thousands of species across the galaxy, yet nothing had prepared him for this sight. A human child no older than 8 years old piloting a virtual warship with a precision and focus that belied their age. He had come to Earth expecting to observe a simple military exercise, perhaps assess the humans' primitive technologies for the Interstellar Council, but this was not what he had anticipated. The child's fingers flew across the controls without hesitation, their ship dancing through enemy fire with an ease that made Zarnik's many limbs twitch with unease. The game was a standard military simulation, or so it appeared, but as Zarnik observed, he began to notice something strange. The child's decisions seemed too deliberate for someone so young, too mature for a being whose age could not even be calculated in galactic terms. The child swerved left, avoiding a blast from a virtual enemy ship, then immediately executed a counterstrike with a series of swift movements that dismantled the virtual fleet in a matter of seconds. Zarnik felt a strange knot tighten in his chest. The child's playstyle was not that of a typical human novice. They were calculating and methodical despite their innocence in appearance. He leaned closer to the glass panel of the observation room, his many arms resting on the cool surface, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make sense of what was unfolding before him. The simulator was meant to test reflexes and strategies, but the child was doing something else entirely. They were anticipating the enemy's moves, predicting them, as though they had studied the battle long before it had even begun. The Admiral felt a chill run through his form. The more he watched, the more his doubts grew. It was as if the child was not simply participating in the game, but shaping the outcome of the battle through pure intuition. The room was quiet except for the hum of the simulator's machinery and the faint tapping of the child's fingers. The virtual warship glided through a storm of simulated debris and enemy fire with a kind of elegance that seemed to defy logic. How could a mere child possess such skill and instinct? Zarnik questioned his initial assumptions about humanity's potential in war. Were they really as primitive as the Council believed, or was there something far more dangerous lurking beneath their crude technologies? Zarnik was not sure, but one thing was clear: this child was not simply playing a game. They were preparing for something far greater. Zarnik's mind whirled as he watched the child's hands continue their rhythmic dance across the controls, their fingers moving with purpose, every action coordinated and precise, as though the simulation were not a game at all, but a true test of skill and strategy. It was unsettling. The Admiral had expected to observe a simple training exercise meant to hone the human's basic combat skills, yet this was something far more complex. He could not look away. The child's movements seemed to follow an almost unnatural cadence. They seemed to anticipate the enemy's moves before the virtual ships even made them, as though they could predict the entire flow of the battle in advance. Zarnik had studied combat for centuries, not just as a warrior, but as a tactician. He knew how to read patterns in battle, how to anticipate the ebb and flow of warfare. Yet this child was defying all the logic he had spent his life perfecting. How could a mere human child be capable of such an instinctive understanding of combat? He watched as the child guided their ship through a deadly gauntlet of enemy fire, their ship darting and weaving through incoming blasts with an agility that was almost beyond belief. The enemy's weapons fired in perfect synchrony, yet the child responded with such skill that each shot missed by mere fractions of a second. It was a display of reflexes that even the most seasoned warriors would struggle to match. The child's movements were not erratic or chaotic, but calculated and deliberate. With each new wave of enemies, they responded with a new strategy, a new maneuver that Sarnak had not expected to see at all. The ship seemed to shift its path in real time, adjusting to the changing dynamics of the battle in a way that felt almost instinctual. The child wasn't just reacting, they were creating opportunities, moving with the kind of foresight that most experienced commanders could only dream of. And that was when Sarnak realized the horrifying truth. The child was not just playing a game, they were studying the art of war in a way that went far beyond the capabilities of what he had thought was possible for a species like humanity. Sarnak's antennae twitched in frustration as he tried to comprehend the depth of what he was witnessing. The simulation was designed to train human soldiers how to think like commanders, how to plan and execute strategies. But this child was not just playing by the rules of the simulation, they were rewriting them, creating new tactics and new rules as they went along. Sarnak had seen simulations before, but never one that seemed so alive with possibility. This was not simply a test of the child's ability to pilot a ship, it was a test of their mind, their creativity, their vision. In battle, the way they blended strategy and intuition was something that no textbook could teach, something far deeper than any program could simulate. The Admiral stepped back from the observation window, his thoughts swirling in confusion and unease. What he had thought was a simple display of human childishness had become something far more dangerous. He had watched species evolve over the millennia, seen civilizations rise and fall, but never had he encountered anything like this. The way this child played with such precision, with such creativity. Could it be possible that humanity was already far beyond the capabilities he had assumed? Could they truly be designing their own methods of war in real time, creating new strategies from scratch before his very eyes? Sarnak was no longer certain whether this was simply a game or something much more significant, something that could shape the future of warfare itself. Sarnak's mind raced as the child continued to weave through the simulation, now at a pace that seemed almost impossible. Each action was met with a reaction, each move perfectly timed, as if the child had mastered the art of predicting the battlefield before it even unfolded. The Admiral could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the growing realization gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. The way the child executed each maneuver, each counterattack, was like watching a general plan the course of an entire war with nothing more than a joystick and a screen. How could this be? How could a mere child, so small, so unassuming, possess such an uncanny understanding of combat? The simulation's complexity grew with each level. Virtual warships became more aggressive, the enemy forces more ruthless, yet the child never faltered. Sarnak's many eyes tracked every decision the child made, searching for a flaw, a mistake, a misstep that would prove the limits of their skill. But none came. The child's ship danced through a storm of digital projectiles with ease, the flick of their wrist redirecting the ship's course with fluid precision. The virtual enemies, no longer just passive targets, began to adapt as well, firing in unison, attempting to corner the child's ship. Yet even in the face of this mounting pressure, the child remained calm, executing each evasion with the certainty of a veteran commander. The more Sarnak watched, the more he realized something profoundly disturbing. The child wasn't merely playing to win. They were dissecting every facet of battle. The way they manipulated the virtual enemies wasn't just to survive. It was to dominate the battlefield. The child was setting traps, feints, and ambushes in ways that Sarnak had never seen from a species so young, so untested in real war. It was as if the child's mind had unlocked the very blueprint of combat itself. The ship maneuvered with the precision of a seasoned pilot and the ruthlessness of a battle-hardened soldier. It was a striking fusion of instinct and intellect, a perfect harmony of decision-making under pressure. Sarnak observed how the child began to anticipate the movements of the digital enemies, responding before the first shots were even fired. The child's hands moved like an orchestra conductor, orchestrating every piece of the virtual warship's movements in perfect harmony. Each decision was a thread in a larger web, each move a carefully calculated part of a larger strategy that only the child seemed to see. Sarnak couldn't understand it. It was as if the child had somehow understood not just the tactics of warfare, but the psychology of it. The child wasn't just reacting to the threats on screen. They were shaping the battle, bending the simulation to their will. As the simulation advanced to its final level, the child's ship faced an overwhelming force, an entire fleet of digital enemies, larger and more coordinated than ever. This was supposed to be the test, the ultimate challenge. But what Sarnak saw next left him in awe and fear. The child's ship did not run. It did not retreat. It did not hesitate. Instead, the child turned the tables in a way that seemed to defy all logic. With one sudden, unexpected maneuver, the child split the enemy fleet into disarray, isolating each ship and systematically dismantling them with a cold, clinical precision. In less than a minute, the overwhelming fleet was reduced to nothing. Sarnak's many eyes widened in disbelief. This was not just the work of an impressive pilot or a clever strategist. This was the work of someone who had absorbed the very nature of war, who had learned to think several steps ahead, to read the minds of the enemy without even seeing their faces. This child had transformed a game into a full-scale war, reshaping the entire simulation with a creativity and ruthlessness that had shaken the Admiral to his core. In that moment, Sarnak realized that what he had been watching was far more than a game. This child, this human, was not merely playing. They were rewriting the future of warfare itself. And if the rest of humanity shared even a fraction of this child's brilliance, the galaxy would soon find itself facing a new kind of threat, one that no one could have predicted. Sarnak felt a ripple of unease deep within his core as the child's final victory in the simulation unfolded before him. The enemy fleet, shattered by the child's relentless tactics, lay in ruin. The battlefield was silent, save for the hum of the simulation's ambient noises. The child's hands rested for a moment on the controls, their eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that should not have been possible from someone so young. It was as if they had simply completed a task that was expected of them. Sarnak was no longer watching a child play. He was witnessing the birth of a new kind of warfare, one that humanity was shaping with startling speed. The Admiral took a deep, shuddering breath, his many eyes flicking across the data streams that scrolled across his vision. He had been tracking every move the child made, every choice, every decision, and now the full implications of what he had just witnessed were beginning to take root in his mind. The child had not just played the game. They had mastered it. Every tactical choice, every counter, every feint had been executed with the precision of a seasoned warlord. The way they maneuvered, the way they read the flow of combat, it was all wrong. It was wrong in a way that made Sarnak question everything he had believed about humanity. He glanced at the data logs that the simulation had generated, attempting to parse out what had just happened. The child's performance was impossible to replicate. No human, even with years of training, could move with such instinctual brilliance. It was as though they had somehow bypassed the need for long years of education and military experience. Sarnak's hands trembled slightly as he reviewed the log entries. Every move made by the child had been a calculated risk, a break from standard procedures, but each one had paid off flawlessly. The child had not just beaten the simulation, they had rewritten its very design, forcing it to evolve in real time to match their capabilities. Sarnak's antennae twitched in frustration as he scanned the programming behind the simulation. It was sophisticated, yes, but what truly unsettled him was how quickly the child had adapted to it. The child had not just learned the strategies it taught, they had surpassed them, creating their own set of rules. There were no easy answers, no simple cause and effect. Every decision had been made in the heat of the moment, and every decision had been the right one. How was this possible? How could a mere human be capable of such innovation on the fly? The realization hit Sarnak with full force. This simulation wasn't just a tool for human soldiers to learn tactics. It was a breeding ground for new tactics. The program didn't simply replicate past wars or present challenges. It was a dynamic, evolving system that learned from each player's decisions, adapting its challenges to match the player's growing abilities. And in this child, humanity had found a player who was not only mastering the simulation, they were breaking it. This child wasn't just learning war. They were designing it, crafting their own strategies, evolving in ways that no one had anticipated. Zarnik felt the weight of his discovery settling on him, heavy and suffocating. His initial belief that humanity was still a primitive species was rapidly slipping away. This human child, had just demonstrated the potential to reshape warfare on a scale that no alien empire had prepared for. The child wasn't just reacting to the game. They were creating the next generation of military tactics. The simulation had been meant to challenge them, to test their reflexes and adaptability, but instead, it had become a canvas for the child's rapidly developing mind. What had begun as a simple exercise in strategy was now something far greater. Zarnik's thoughts began to race as he realized the true scope of the threat. If humanity was producing minds like this one, minds capable of innovating warfare with such speed, the galaxy was in danger. The child's brilliance wasn't a fluke. It was a sign of things to come. And Zarnik knew that if humanity ever realized the true power they held, they would be a force like no other. Zarnik leaned back in his chair, staring at the child on the screen, whose hands were now resting gently on the controls after the final simulation victory. The hum of the simulation was a faint backdrop to the thundering thoughts racing through the Admiral's mind. He had watched in awe as the child rewrote the rules of combat in real time, leaving behind a trail of digital debris in their wake. What had seemed like a harmless observation of a human child playing a game had transformed into something far more unsettling. This child was not just playing. They were mastering the art of war in ways that no species, let alone a mere human, should be capable of. Zarnik's mind was no longer focused on the child alone. His thoughts turned to the larger picture. If one child could possess this level of instinctual brilliance, what did that mean for the rest of humanity? He glanced at the data logs once more. The child had not simply followed the simulation's design. They had found ways to exploit its weaknesses, to anticipate its very structure. With every new challenge, the child adapted with frightening speed, always staying one step ahead. The sheer unpredictability of their decisions was what made them so dangerous. What had started as a simulation to test a human's ability to execute simple strategies had become a forge for innovation, a place where the child was inventing entirely new methods of warfare. The Admiral's antennae twitched nervously as the implications of his discovery took hold. He was no longer concerned with the limitations of human technology or their underdeveloped fleets. It was the human mind that was the true weapon. What he had witnessed was not the result of superior technology or weaponry. It was the mind of a child, a mind capable of synthesizing information at a speed that rivaled any advanced artificial intelligence. The simulation, once a tool for training soldiers, had become the birthplace of entirely new military doctrines. And if humanity could cultivate minds like this, it could change the entire balance of power in the galaxy. As Zarnik's thoughts swirled, he was interrupted by a transmission from his superiors. The message was brief, cold, and calculated. Continue the mission. Gather more intelligence on Earth's capabilities. Assess their readiness for war. There was no sign of concern in the message, no recognition of the depth of what Zarnik had uncovered. To his superiors, humanity was still a primitive species, their technological advancements still far behind the rest of the galaxy. But Zarnik knew better. He knew that what he had seen in this child was not an isolated incident. The humans were learning to think like commanders, to innovate, to adapt, qualities that made them dangerous in ways that no one could predict. He hesitated for a moment before responding, knowing that his words could change everything. The child's brilliance had shaken him to his core, but it had also opened his eyes to the truth. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. They were still in the early stages of discovering their potential, but if they continued on this path, they could become a force of unimaginable power. "I need more time," Sarnik transmitted, his voice steady but laced with urgency. The child, this human, is not just playing a game. They are crafting the future of warfare. I need to understand how widespread this ability is. He paused, his fingers hovering over the console as he considered the weight of his next words. "We are not dealing with a species of primitive warriors. We are dealing with innovators, creators of war." As he sent the transmission, Sarnik realized he was no longer just an observer. He had become a witness to something far greater than anything he had anticipated. The galaxy was not ready for what humanity was becoming, and soon, neither would be he. Zarnik's request for more time was met with resistance. His superiors, dismissive of his concerns, insisted that the mission should proceed as planned. To them, the child's display of skill was nothing more than an anomaly, a fluke, a rare occurrence in a species that was still considered primitive by galactic standards. But Sarnik couldn't shake the growing sense of dread that gnawed at him. His eyes shifted from the data logs on his screen to the image of the child, who was now beginning another round in the simulator. The calm, focused expression on their face, the effortless way their hands moved across the controls. Sarnik knew he was witnessing the development of something far more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. As the child continued to play, the Admiral studied their every action, trying to discern the underlying logic behind their decisions. The more he observed, the more he realized that the child was not simply adapting to the game. They were actively reshaping the very nature of the battle. It was as if they could feel the game's pulse, anticipating threats before they materialized. They weren't just reacting to the enemies within the simulation. They were setting traps for them, forcing them into positions of weakness with a strategic foresight that defied their age. The simulation began to grow more complex, with enemy fleets coming in waves and new challenges emerging at every turn. But the child was undeterred. With each passing level, they seemed to become more fluid, more confident in their decisions. The child wasn't just playing to win anymore. They were playing to create new realities within the game, to bend the simulation to their will. Each battle felt less like a test and more like a battlefield where the child was both general and architect. Zarnik's mind was in overdrive as he tried to make sense of what he was witnessing. Could this be the result of the child's natural intelligence, or was it something else? Was humanity somehow able to unlock abilities in their young that no other species had ever dreamed of? The sheer unpredictability of the child's moves was enough to unnerve even the most experienced commanders. They were not just mastering the game, they were elevating it, crafting new dimensions of strategy that Sarnik had never seen before. And if this child could do it, what of others like them? What would humanity become if these minds were allowed to flourish unchecked? The Admiral's thoughts were interrupted by another transmission, this time from a lower-ranking officer who had been monitoring the simulation data from afar. "Admiral," the voice crackled over the comm, "we've detected something unusual. The child's performance. This is beyond any standard. The simulation has begun evolving faster than it should. It's adapting to the child's actions in real time." Zarnik's eyes narrowed, his antennae twitching with surprise. "Explain." "The game. It's learning," the officer continued. "The simulation's algorithm is adapting to every move the child makes, creating new scenarios and challenges that weren't in the original design. The child isn't just defeating it, they're accelerating its evolution." Zarnik's chest tightened. This wasn't just a game anymore. This was a test of something far more dangerous. The potential for a human mind to manipulate and control a system with such ease that it no longer followed preordained rules. The simulation had become a sentient entity, evolving beyond its original purpose because of the child's actions. It was a reflection of what humanity could one day achieve, not only mastering warfare but controlling the very systems of war itself. Is there any way to stop it? Sarnak asked, his voice sharp, laced with urgency. Not without shutting the entire system down, sir, the officer replied. But that would erase all the data we've collected. We're trying to isolate the core, but the child's influence is growing. Zarnuk turned back to the screen, his thoughts racing. He could feel the walls closing in. If humanity could manipulate their systems in this way, if their minds were capable of reshaping the very foundations of warfare, then they had already surpassed what any of the galactic powers had prepared for. The universe had always been in balance, until now. Humanity wasn't just a species on the rise. They were a force that could alter the fabric of war itself. For the first time in his career, Sarnak was uncertain. There was no clear path forward. There was only the realization that the galaxy, as he knew it, was about to be irrevocably changed. Zarnak felt the weight of his realization pressing on him, each moment more suffocating than the last. The child's influence on the simulation, the way it had evolved in real time, had shattered any illusions he had about humanity's primitive nature. He had been so certain that the humans were still years away from posing a real threat to the galaxy, but now, in the span of a few hours, everything had changed. The child had not just played a game. They had exposed an unsettling truth. Humanity had the potential to manipulate systems, adapt, and innovate with an ingenuity that could reshape the very landscape of warfare. The officer's voice crackled again, breaking his thoughts. "Admiral, we've isolated the core of the simulation, but it's still reacting. We can't control it. The child's influence has spread beyond the simulation itself." Zarnak's antennae twitched with a sense of dread. The simulation, once a tool for human training, had become something far more dangerous. It was no longer just a game. It had become an evolving entity, a mirror reflecting the brilliance of humanity's mind. What had begun as a mere training exercise was now a proof of concept for humanity's potential to revolutionize war. The child's ability to manipulate the system was not limited to a simulation. What if this was just the beginning? What if humanity had already unlocked the key to war's future, one they had yet to fully understand? "What are you suggesting?" Sarnak asked, his voice tight with tension. The officer hesitated. "I don't know, sir. But if the simulation is evolving, it's possible the child's actions are triggering something that could have real-world consequences. The systems we've been using to monitor human warfare could be compromised." Zarnak's mind raced. It was as if he had opened a door to a new kind of war, one that defied the boundaries of traditional combat. Humanity wasn't just learning to fight. They were learning to build war itself, to shape it according to their needs, to mold it like clay. The simulation had become a proving ground for a new form of conflict, one where the lines between virtual and reality were blurring. The child wasn't just playing a game. They were crafting a new type of battle that could one day be fought on a galactic scale. If humanity could learn to manipulate war in this way, if their minds were capable of creating endless variations of strategy, then Sarnak understood just how dangerous they had become. The child was merely the first example, the first spark in what could become a wildfire of creativity. And if humanity's technological advancements caught up with their strategic brilliance, they could become an unstoppable force. No empire, no matter how powerful, could withstand the sheer unpredictability of a mind capable of designing warfare on the fly. Zarnak turned away from the screen, his mind focused on the larger picture. It wasn't just about this one child. It was about humanity's entire future. His task had been to observe and report back on humanity's capabilities. But now, he understood that his mission was far more complex. The humans were evolving faster than anyone had predicted, and with this newfound understanding of their potential, they could very well change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "Status report on the human military," Sarnak asked, his voice low. The officer responded quickly. "They are still in the early stages, sir. Their technology is inferior to ours in terms of weapons and ship design, but their tactics are becoming increasingly unpredictable. We've never seen anything like it." Zarnak nodded, his mind spinning. It was clear that humanity was on the cusp of something extraordinary, something terrifying. Their sheer unpredictability, their ability to adapt to changing circumstances, to see possibilities that others missed, these were the traits of a species that would not only survive, but thrive in the chaos of war. If the humans could take what they had learned in the simulation and apply it to the real world, then it was only a matter of time before they would be a force to reckon with. "Prepare the fleet," Zarnik said, his voice cold and commanding. "We need to know everything we can about humanity's potential, and we need to do it quickly. This galaxy will not be unprepared." As he spoke, he knew that the galaxy had entered a new era, and humanity, with their innovation and unyielding drive, was on the verge of reshaping the very nature of conflict itself. Zarnik wasn't just dealing with a new kind of war. He was facing a species that had unlocked the future of combat. And that future, he now understood, would not be kind to anyone who underestimated humanity. Zarnik stood in the command center, his gaze fixed on the vast holographic map that floated before him. His fleet was assembled, ready for action, but his mind was elsewhere, consumed by the images of that child, their calm, calculating gaze as they effortlessly dismantled the simulation. The galaxy had always been a place of strategic power, but now, everything was in motion. An unpredictable force had entered the equation, and its name was humanity. His orders were clear: observe, assess, and report back. But now, those orders seemed insufficient. The child's actions had illuminated a disturbing truth. Humanity was not simply growing into their potential. They had already tapped into something that could shift the power dynamics of the entire galaxy. The simulation, which had started as an innocuous training tool, had become a crucible for warfare innovation. And humanity wasn't just playing the game. They were remaking it, crafting it with each decision. As Karnak reviewed the reports from his fleet, his thoughts kept returning to the simulation's evolving nature. The child had forced the game to adapt faster than it had ever been designed to. But what was even more unsettling was how the child had anticipated every move the game made. It was as if the child could perceive patterns in the chaos, creating strategy from the chaos itself. If humanity's brightest minds had developed this kind of brilliance in such a short amount of time, how long would it be before their military, their entire species, had mastered this ability? How could any existing empire hope to face them in battle? Zarnik's deep voice broke the silence in the room. "We are not facing just another species. We are facing a new kind of intelligence, one that is capable of bending the very fabric of warfare. If this is the future of human warfare, then we are already too far behind." His officer, still processing the data, nodded gravely. "Admiral, we have never encountered a species with this level of adaptability. Every report we've received indicates that human tactics are evolving faster than their technology can keep up with. If they ever catch up in terms of military hardware, they could become an unstoppable force." Zarnik's mind raced as the implications of those words sank in. It wasn't just about the child anymore. The entire species was capable of rethinking warfare. The way they approached combat, quick, efficient, and unpredictable, was a strategy that no fleet could anticipate. It was as if they had unlocked a secret to war itself, the ability to shape it, manipulate it, and adapt it as they saw fit. He turned to face his officers. "We will monitor Earth closely, but we cannot allow this to continue unchecked. The galaxy must know what humanity is capable of before it's too late." The officers nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Zarnik's decision was clear, but the path forward was clouded with uncertainty. How could they stop something so unpredictable, so inherently adaptive? How could they outmaneuver a species that had already demonstrated an ability to think several steps ahead? The answer was simple: they couldn't. The Admiral knew that the only way to prepare for the future was to understand it, and that meant facing the reality of humanity's terrifying potential. In the quiet that followed, Zarnik couldn't help but reflect on the child, still out there, unaware of the storm they had set in motion. The galaxy was on the brink of a new age, one in which humanity would no longer be a bystander. They would be the ones shaping the battlefield, the ones setting the terms of war. And in that war, the galaxy's old powers, its old alliances and old tactics, would be no match for the unpredictable, evolving force that was humanity. As Karnak looked out into the vastness of space, he realized one thing with certainty: the galaxy would never be the same again. And neither would he.